Are we okay to go live, Susie? Yeah?
Yes, Chair, we're now live. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Susie. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this morning's Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting. Can I remind all participants, as this is a virtual meeting, that normal rules and procedures apply. For example, comments and questions need to be directed through the chair. As we meet virtually, proceedings may take slightly longer, so your patience is appreciated. While members of the public can view this meeting via YouTube Live, they will not be able to actively participate or comment on proceedings, as this meeting is being live streamed. Can I remind all participants that their conduct should reflect this? We'll go straight onto the agenda this morning. Have you apologies for absent, Caroline?
Yes, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Tom Morstan. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, thank you. Are we any declarations of interest? No hands up, no, thank you. Minutes from the Overview Scrutiny Board on the 28th of July. Can we class them as true reading? Yep, can we have a second? Thank you. Agenda item number 4. And I think we're still waiting for the Mayor at the moment, so I'd like to bring the agenda item number 5 before that, the Scrutiny Chair's update, please. So could we have, I've got ticket as a line, it's Jim Platt, please, Adult Social Care Service Scrutiny Panel. Jim?
You caught me unawares there. However, the Adult Social Care and Services Scrutiny Panel last week on the 1st of September. At this meeting, the panel received 2 updates from the Director of Adult Social Care and Health Integration. The first update was in relation to the integration of health and social care, and the second was in relation to the adult daycare services with a particular focus upon the impact of COVID-19. During the integration of health and social care update, the panel heard that the NHS structural changes meant that the impending integrated care system would cover a much larger geographical footprint. For example, the wider North East and Cumbria area, as opposed to only the Tees Valley. From a scrutiny perspective,
Have you muted yourself, Jim?
sorry?
Did you mute yourself there? You come out. I don't know, it was just on my...
Okay, I'll go back if I haven't heard. During the integration of health and social care update, the panel heard that the NHS structural changes meant that the impending integrated care system would cover a much larger geographical footprint. For example, the wider North East and Cumbria area, as opposed to only the Tees Valley. From a scrutiny perspective, Councillor Wilson raised a query as to what these changes would mean to the Council's scrutiny processes. For example, whether the South Tees Joint Health Scrutiny Committee would continue as is, or whether it would be replaced by an alternative function board. This is certainly something that we will need to be considered as plans progress. And the panel's next meeting will be held on the 13th of October.
Thanks very much, Jim. Thank you. Can we go to Councillor McCabe, please? Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny Panel. Dennis?
Good morning, everybody. We've held a meeting this week and we've started the scrutiny into the schools and attendance as part of our remit. I've also got the final report that I will briefly go through to this morning that we will put to executive for approval in the near future. The purpose of the review was to examine the key principles to help improve behaviour in schools. The terms of reference for the review included the powers and duties of schools, the local authorities' role in supporting schools, the cause of pupil behaviour problems and the challenges faced by schools, the types of sanction used and the successful strategies used to promote positive behaviour, manage poor behaviour and prevent and tackle bullying. Terms of reference can be detailed in paragraph 2 of the report. Based on the evidence given throughout the investigation, the scrutiny panel conducted that, All schools have their own behaviour policies, which set out their definition and expectation of good behaviour and their breaches of the policy that will be responded to. Although early indications demonstrate the new inclusion, assessment and review service and team around the school approach is having a positive impact, it is too early to evaluate this impact. The nature of the influence on the behaviour of both complex and interactional. When behaviour is identified, there is a need for schools to ensure sanctions are implemented consistently and fairly in line with the behaviour policy for each school. Exclusion should not necessarily be the consequence of persistent bad behaviour, but a sanction for which in line has been crossed, typically because pupils or staff are at risk of or have been subject to harm and abuse.
Councillor McCabe, sorry for interrupting. The final report is not it's not an item yet. I've just been
Okay,
so-
Chair.
Okay, thanks, Dennis.
I'll leave it
Thanks
at
for
that.
that.
Sorry.
No problem, Dennis. Thanks very much. Next on my list is the Children and Young People Social Care Services. I've been informed this morning from Caroline that Councillor Lee Garvey has resigned as chair of that panel, and also Councillor Carolyn Dodds has also resigned. I'm not sure where that takes us, Caroline. Do you know if there's a meeting before the 22nd, a panel meeting, where there'll be an interim chair, or will it go to the full council on the 22nd?
Hi, Chair. I think there is a meeting scheduled just before the full council meeting on the 22nd, but I'm not sure what the status is with that meeting at the moment or what will happen at that meeting. I know that a report is being compiled to go to full council on the 22nd for council to appoint a new chair of the scrutiny panel.
Thanks, Caroline. Andrew, can you come in there? Because as I say, if there's a panel meeting before the full council and the chair and vice chair have resigned, you know, will that panel, that scrutiny panel have to be cancelled, or wait till the 22nd until a new chair be voted in?
I'll have to look into that. Is it an answer that you require for this meeting? I mean, it's. I'm sure Democratic Services are on with looking at how they replace them.
Yeah, I think it's with it. It's just news yesterday, I believe, Caroline, if that's right. Yeah. So we'll just have to see what happens on that with that panel. But it is I mean, all scrutiny panels are important, but I think under the certain time, this Children's and Young People Social Care Service is very important panel that needs sorting as quick as possible. Okay.
Yes,
What
Sorry, Chair.
they just appoint a pro tem at the meeting? They'll still have the meeting and appoint a pro tem chair.
Yeah. We're not clear whether Leah and Caroline have actually come off the panel altogether or just resigned. It's, as it is, it's just, the news is just out really. So maybe we just have to see what that panel decides when they meet. Have you got a date, Caroline? Did you say you had a date?
Yes, Chair. The meeting scheduled to be held on the 21st. So it'll probably be in discussion. Yeah, it's the day before the full council meeting. So it'll be determined whether that meeting will go ahead with a pro tem chair elected, or whether that meeting gets deferred until after the 22nd to allow for a new chair to be appointed by full council. I think that will be done in discussion with the Director of Children's Services, Sue Butcher, as well, who's here today. So it obviously depends on what was scheduled to come to that meeting on the 21st.
Okay, Caroline, thanks.
I think Sue would like to come in there. Sorry.
Sure, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. If it's okay, I'd just like to make a comment. I'd like to really endorse what you're saying about needing to get this sorted as quickly as possible. You're absolutely right to highlight this fact. We've already had, as you know, some considerable changes in terms of the political leadership, and this is yet another one. I'm sure we will all work through it, but it is something that we need to work through as soon as we possibly can. So thank you for your comments, Chair.
Absolutely, so thank you. Okay, we move on to the next update. It's Culture and Community Scrutiny Panel. Councillor Chris McIntyre. Chris.
Good morning, Councillor Chris McIntyre, Chair of Culture and Communities. There's not a lot to say because we've not had a meeting since the last OSB, So shortly we'll be having a pre-meeting with myself, the Vice Chair and Susie Blood to discuss what areas we would like to look closer at. And the next meeting proper of Culture and Communities is the 23rd of this month. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Next on my list is Economic Development and Environment Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, Councillor Stefan Walker. Stefan?
Thank you, Chair. We haven't actually met since the last meeting. We're going to be having a meeting this afternoon. The agenda that we've got for the meeting is the Director of Environment and Community Services will be in attendance to provide an overview with Middlesbrough Council's Green Strategy as an introduction to the panel's new topic, the Green Strategy and the Council plans for increasing biodiversity. And we're going to be having a post-COVID-19 regeneration scrutiny review. We've got a draft final report. And as a panel, we're going to be discussing conclusions to bring forward to OSB and the executive. So that meeting will be, I think, at 4 o'clock today, I think it is. And that's really all I've got to report for now.
Okay, Councillor Walker, thanks very much. And last but not least, Health Scrutiny Panel, Councillor Cook.
Yes, thanks, Chair. We met last night, so I've not really had time to do a full report, but I can go through what we had. We had an update from Mark Adams, Director of Public Health, who we have today, on COVID-19. Very comprehensive update by Mark, and he answered quite a few questions, showing that things are rising up. The main item on the agenda, which we had, was a talk by Dr. Heather Brown of Newcastle University. She provided an overview for what the first subject we're going to do with his Health for Wealth, building on a healthier northern powerhouse for UK productivity. It was an excellent report. It touched on subjects like inequality in health and wages, disparity in the northeast, poverty in the north, and various other things, the effects of Brexit and other health equalities. It was very well done, very well put, and she answered many questions. We then had Chris Thomas, who did the next bit, which is levelling up for prosperity for the north, from the Institute of Public Policy Research. So that was another good report, and that was well received by the panel. And the next meeting will no doubt continue with this subject. That's all I have to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Cook. Thank you.
Chair, would you mind if I added a comment? It's Councillor Hilawi.
I'm not sure it's right. What was it about, Councillor?
It was an additional comment on the Health Scrutiny Panel meeting yesterday.
Right.
So first of all, I'd like to recommend that the two PowerPoints that we watched and would be circulated to all councillors, because they're of vital importance with regard to the town's health and relevant to councillors in all wards. And secondly, I'd like to remind certain councillors about protocols of appropriate behaviour in meetings with regard to respectful and polite questions and comments. I think almost by definition, particularly with financial aspects of the report, they might have been deemed slightly party political by some members, but I think the challenge was disrespectful, and I'd like to remind members that we need to also observe constantly appropriate behaviour in meetings. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Howie. I'm sure them remarks will be noted. Thank you. We'll go back now to the agenda item number 4. Obviously, we've had notice that the Mayor Andy Preston is with us this morning. Good morning, Andy. Okay.
Morning, hello everyone. Hi, sorry I was on mute there. Hi, thank you.
Okay, so just explain, and Andy's here to give updates of three subjects, and only the 3 subjects. It's obviously him being the Mayor of Middlesbrough. Secondly, he's also an executive member of the Adult Social Care and Public Protection, and also lead executive member for Children's Safeguarding. So, Andy, as you do each update, I'd like you to take questions, if that's after each update, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, you know, what I'd like to make clear is that I'm here happy to face any questions at all. I believe Sue Butcher's on the call, and I think if anybody has any questions which are specifically about how the department is running, specifically about anything with any detail at all, Sue is always going to be infinitely better placed than me. The amount of time that I can spend on children's services is limited due to a range of factors. The amount of time I can spend on anything is limited due to a range of factors. And, you know, even if I focused on it for 10 years, I wouldn't know 10% of what Sue Butcher does, who's doing a remarkable job. So Sue is here, and I will defer to Sue with any technical or detailed questions, and I'll ask Sue to come in as well. And Sue, please feel free to chip in. If we talk about children's services, obviously, the bad news is that in the past, we let Middlesbrough children down. Middlesbrough children were done a disservice. What's worse than that, it was particularly the most vulnerable who were badly let down. As we all know, but I think we need to state for the record, is that it was just over 2 years ago, Ofsted appeared and deemed that the place was badly run, inefficient, and doing a really bad job at looking after the most vulnerable members of society, the most precious members of society. So where do you go from there? Well, there were several options open to the government, not to us. And I'm really pleased to say that the path we've ended up on is the best possible outcome. And everything that I can see and all of the questions that I ask and all the information I get tells me that the department is heading the right way, that it has a long way to go, that it is a million miles from being perfect, but it's also a million miles from the low point it was at some time ago. The Children's Commissioner, who was appointed to work with our department, has recommended to the government that we avoid the embarrassment, the humiliation, and the financial uncertainty of having children's services management taken away from us. And I believe the government will decide on that any day now. We are hopeful, and we believe that that will be a positive outcome for us. That's really great news. More than that, the way I see the department going is that we can set national standards. I think that we can be a beacon of good practice, and we discussed some of these issues yesterday at a separate meeting. Sue Butcher was outlining some points. But I think that the areas we need to improve on are in particular things like children absent from school. What I've learned is that in any one day, if you go into a Middlesbrough school, on average, 10% of the kids won't be there. Some of them might be the odd day of illness. Some of them might be habitual truancy or more complex issues. And that's far worse than the national average. Of course, the truth is, it isn't 10% spread evenly across the demographics. The truth is that that 10% is frequently concentrated on the most vulnerable people who need the most from school education. They need the role models, they need the learning, and they need the social interaction. So that's a real priority. I'm tempted to try and keep talking, but I'm going to stop. I'm happy to take questions. As I say, if they're of a technical nature rather than of a political nature or what I would like to see, then I will defer to Sue, and Sue will, I'm sure, feel very free to come on in and talk whenever she feels it's appropriate. But I have to say that I think the staff, both the employed retention staff, have been fantastic. By the way, there will always be some agency staff, but reducing the number of agency staff and the reliance on that temporary phenomenon is something that's going very well. The numbers are being reduced, but there will always be some. And I have to say that under Sue's leadership, huge progress has been made, and I could name other people too, but I think we should all be very grateful for what they've all done. I'll stop talking now. Okay. Happy to answer questions on how I feel things are going, how I would like things to go, and what I think we need to do for Middlesbrough's children.
Okay, thanks Andy for that update on that particular part of your portfolio. I can see a few hands raised, members. You be patient with me. I've got a Caroline going to help me as well, but I've got a couple of hands at the moment. Councillor Cope first, and then Councillor Hobson.
I think Councillor Hobson was actually before me, so I'll defer to Chris.
That's the gentleman here. Yeah, Councillor Hobson, sorry about that.
Thank you, Councillor Coop. That was very generous of you. Actually, my question is probably Sue might answer this, Andy. I'd just like to know numbers, Sue, please. I know we were in the 700s. Where are we now, please? And also, can I ask a second question on social workers? How are we now with employing social workers? Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, our numbers of looked after children have decreased significantly. The last figure I looked at was 539, so that you can see that in a year from August last year, we've come, I can't do the maths in my head, about 140 odd children. So that is a great progress. Some of those children shouldn't have been in our care anyway, because if you recall, councillors, from the first inspection that the mayor mentioned, which was in November, so we're not quite up to the 2 years mark, did show that we were not moving children to their forever homes as swiftly as we should do. So yes, significant progress in that area, and that's only right for children. So we're moving children onto adoption. We had a significant number of children who were placed at home but on care orders, so they were with parents, but actually we were still their legal parents. So you can see that there were quite a few anomalies in the system, and it has taken a long time to work through, but we are making some significant progress, and we expect the number of looked after children to decrease. We will never be an England average. Middlesbrough has its unique perspectives, and of course some of the most deprived areas in the country. So we will never be an English average. We will never be one of our leafy counties, as it were. But we are hopeful of bringing the number down. It'll be more slowly now, because of course we're tackling children who are coming in, as it were. And also that number that, the 100 plus number isn't the same children. Some children will be coming in, of course, as it would be appropriate to do so. And I've forgotten the second question, Councillor. I do apologise.
Social workers, how are we with social workers?
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask Sue, I can hardly hear you, Sue. Can you speak a bit louder, please? Thank you.
Is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Okay, I apologise. I'm not usually known for being quiet. So anyway, so in terms of the numbers of social workers, we have a workforce development strategy, and out of that there's a recruitment and retention drive. We've got a new website, which I can send the link to Caroline so that it can go out, and it is about recruiting experienced social workers. We could bring in more newly qualified social workers, but actually we need workers, as you know, who can tackle the more complex pieces of work. So we have this drive on recruitment and retention. Our aim is, and as Andy said, it might sound it might not sound as ambitious as councillors may wish, but our aim is to get down to 15% of agency social workers. That's a sort of national average. And again, in a town like Middlesbrough, is that achievable? Yes, actually, I think it is, with the recruitment and retention drive. And that's being tracked every 6 weeks at LMT. We have a series of proxy indicators. That's one of them, because as you know, Councillor Hobson, the agency staff cost more. So we need to reduce the numbers of agency staff in order to bring the budget online. And there's been a significant amount of demand profiling in order to look at how we get to that number. The exact percentage at the moment I don't have in my head. Again, I can make sure that that's emailed over. However, it's slightly affected by the fact that we've still got 3 managed teams. The one managed team is supporting us to bring down the numbers of looked after children, so that you can see that by reducing some of those really high cost placements, And we have some very high cost placements at the moment, even though our average is, I think, 3,500 a week. So we're doing a lot to bring down the numbers of agency workers, but also not to forget that we will always have some. It's a national issue. We are fishing in, quite a small pool, and we have to value the experience that agency workers bring, whilst also striving to make Middlesbrough an employer, apologies, of choice.
Thanks, Sue. Thank you. Councillor Cook, this is directed to the Mayor. Yeah, a question?
Yes, directed to the Mayor. I think Sue may be able to answer part of the question, but it's more of a comment, really. I was pleased to see recently that there's more and more of the children being looked after or foster care, because it was 65, then it went up to 85 children. This is costing the council a lot of money, which could be better spent on children's services rather than spending it on outside bodies and things. I just found it incredible that we were sending children to Liverpool, to London, wherever, and those children should be looked after closer to home, because their problems and things away from the families and away from family and friends is terrible, and it can have an adverse effect on them. So I was pleased about that. And it does seem to me that sometimes Middlesbrough was looked on as an easy pickings for some of these companies that may offer very good service, but be far better off if we were doing it ourselves in-house, because not only control the price, because as just been stated there, it can be £3,500–4,000 a week for a basic child, and children with lots and lots of problems can be up to 12,000, maybe even more. I believe there's one child it's £18,000–19,000 a week. So that's a lot of money for Middlesbrough Council to find. It is vitally important that we do that and we look after the children, but it'd be far better in-house, where we can control it, we control the environment. So just what your thoughts are, Andy, on that, and how are we going to achieve even better things? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you hit a good point, and actually I mentioned yesterday earlier, and I'll mention yesterday again. Sue did highlight the fact that there's an ambition. So not, Chris's comment there about the number of looked after kids, number of kids in care, and that's coming down, and that's great. But above and beyond that very basic statistic, the numbers of kids that are in care in Middlesbrough is growing. So the numbers of kids outside the area is shrinking. It's really important to get that down. And I think Sue will step in if I'm speaking out of turn or for her when I shouldn't, but I think there is an absolute ambition and determination that, barring exceptional circumstances, all of our kids in care should be in care in Middlesbrough. And if we have to make sure they get great care and the cost is reasonable, obviously we don't preclude taking kids into care in our own facilities and expanding that as time goes on. I don't know if Sue would like to add on that.
Sue, would you like
Yes,
to add on to that?
Yes, Chair. I think Mayor's absolutely right. And I truly believe, and I know that all of you will, that Middlesbrough children should be in Middlesbrough. And I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Coote, when children and young people particularly are away from Middlesbrough and they go missing, they come back to Middlesbrough, because it's what they know, it's where they feel comfortable. There will always be some children who need to be placed out of Middlesbrough, and that could be because of specific needs that can only be catered for maybe in selective establishments. It is also a sort of, pardon the phrase, a seller's market at the moment. Finding agency residential placements is extraordinarily difficult, and as you say, we don't have the control is probably the right word, but oversight and assurance as much as we would like about the care of those children. And of course, they can sort of call time on the children and say, we're not going to keep them anymore. So that can cause quite a few significant and very significant placement changes. We are growing our in-house provision. So, for example, for one specific child, just as an example, who has really severe needs, actually, we are building our own facility, which we've worked out with quite considerable detail. Actually, we can, it's not a standalone facility; it's an add-on to one of our facilities. we can care for him, and in over a couple of years it will pay for itself, rather than him being away from Middlesbrough, away from his family, away from what he knows. We have also refurbished one of our children's homes, so that will be, I think, 5 additional places. We've got Daniel Court, which has got 9 places for children and for young people. So that's a recent addition. So we are doing what we can to maximise our availability of residential placements in-house. And also looking at sort of, when one young person moves in, that we have another one planned to come in, rather than have a gap and then think, oh, we need to bring, we've got a gap here, we've got a vacancy, what can we do? In terms of internal foster carers, we are always striving to recruit foster carers. It's not the easiest thing to do, but the fostering service is being reviewed, and with that, the way in which we recruit foster carers, and also, how we support them. So there is a general drive, as much as possible, to use our own resources. We are having some success, I would say, particularly in residential placements at the moment. But again, and it might be useful, Chair, for councillors to see the 7 proxy indicators that we've got. They're indicative of budget, but also indicative in terms of the progress Children's Service is making. So one of the indicators is the reduction in the number of young people in residential, and the increase in our own residential, and the increase in our own fostering. And that's also about using foster carers slightly more creatively. So, for example, if their approval is 5 to 10, could they take a 4-year-old? Could they take an 11-year-old? Not going beyond the pale, but just being a bit challenging, making sure that we get the right children into the right places. So those proxy indicators you might find very useful in terms of some of the focus that we're doing, and it's basic, for me, basic good childcare practice.
Thanks, Sue. Thank you. I'm aware that Councillor Story has to leave early, so I'd like to bring him. Did you have a question, Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things that, I'm not sure if the Mayor can answer, but if he can't, then happy for Sue to answer. The first thing is, what is the average caseload per social worker in Middlesbrough in terms of children in care, and how does that compare to similar local authorities that are in a similar situation to us? Obviously, like you were saying, I wouldn't necessarily compare it to the national average, but in terms of other local authorities in a similar position, how do our caseloads compare per social worker? And also, the second thing is about early help and prevention. And I just wondered how I think we all know how important the early help and the prevention work is in order to try and work with families so that we don't end up in a situation where children have to be taken into care wherever possible. And I just wondered how is that element of the service performing, and how are we managing to make sure that that performs the role it needs to in order to keep as many children with their families wherever possible.
Andy, can you answer that? Or
well, I'll definitely give well, what I know. Sue can give detail. I do know that our number of the caseload per full-time equivalent was way too high, putting pressure on people, perhaps sometimes reducing their ability to do a great job. The last time I looked, it was 18.4 per full-time equivalent. I'm sure Sue can update me on that and give a better overview. But yeah, the initial starting life is obviously important. All of our council departments, they all have grey areas where they cross over and mix and match. And actually, what we're getting into there is obviously a crossover between children's services and public health. And something I was going to touch on later was a strategic priority, which is to give kids the best start in life. Reducing health inequalities at the beginning. Obviously, if we can do that, then we're going to get better outcomes at the end, 10, 20, 30 years later, in all kinds of ways. But I will pass those questions on to Sue to give you a really strong answer, if that's okay, Sue.
Okay, thank you. I'm just looking at the performance report that went to our strategic improvement board. So at the moment, our caseloads, yes, they are higher than I would like them to be. The average caseloads at the moment are 19.9 per FTE, which is a slight increase from June, which was 19.2, and a decrease from the high experienced in October 2021, which was 24.3. So you can see that there has been a significant reduction. So we have at the moment our highest caseloads are between we only have one worker who has got over 30 cases. But our the main focus is we've got 26.4% have 16 to 20 cases, and 20% have cases of 21 to 25, and 15.4% have cases of 26 to 30. So one of the highest caseloads at the moment is in the Children with Disabilities team, because of course once they start looking after a child or supporting a child, it is for that child's minority years. So caseloads have come down, and that is affording workers more time to focus on what they need to do. I think that the caseloads in early help, sort of crossing over to that area that you're talking about, caseloads in early help are too high at the moment. They are 27. No, they're actually in early help, there are 31 children per worker, and that's higher than the service target. The good news about that, if it can be put slightly differently, is that actually we're working with more children at an early help level. Now we need to look at how the service manages that. And one thing that we need to do is get partner agencies to be the lead professional in working with those children. So at the moment, schools are really high on the agenda and are the lead professional for a considerable number of children being worked at the early help level. We need to support health to do that better. And I'm about to have conversations with Mark Adams about that, who probably isn't looking up at me as we speak. Oh, he is now. Okay. So caseloads in early help are too high. There's a good news side to that story. The other thing that I would say, though, actually is post-COVID, demand is high for our children's services. It's high in the Northeast, and that would make it high nationally. We have to continue to work with that. We have to make sure that our practice improves, because one of my big mantras is that good practice takes less time than poor practice.
Thanks. Is that okay, Matt?
Yep, thanks very much.
Yep. Councillor Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. My question was actually covered by Councillor Story. It was around the caseload, so thank you for that.
Okay, thanks, Janet. Yeah. Now, I can't see Councillor Alawi or Councillor Stefan or Dennis, so I'm not sure whether you've got any questions on this.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm okay. Thank you, Chair. I've
Okay.
listened to the information. Thanks, Councillor Halawi. Speak.
I'm okay,
Thank you.
Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then that's fine on that part. Do you want to start talking about the adult social care, Andy?
Yes, thank you.
Part of your report, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And what I'll do is I'll group. There is a lot of overlap. Obviously, as I said earlier, all departments touch each other across the whole council, but particularly, in Eric Scully's directorate, which is the public protection, public health with Mark Adams, and also adult social care. So I'll discuss them all together, basically. But interestingly, what Matt's story raised earlier was the talk about the first start in life, those first days, weeks, and months, and that's actually a strategic priority. Eric supplied me with some information on this and other matters very recently, and so did Mark Adams, and that's got to be, the best possible start in life has got to be great for ultimately for our children's services department. It's got to be great for our kids in school. It's got to be great for our families' general well-being and mental health, and it's got to be great for someone's employment opportunities and ultimately their longevity and physical health. So that's a really key strategic priority. Others that I'll mention here that I think I should do is building on the dementia-friendly Middlesbrough, the success of that and the strengths of that. I think we have set some national standards there in good practice and engagement. And it's about building on that, but obviously focusing not just on the sufferers. And I talk as someone, my dad has, fairly early stage, not too debilitating at this point, but vascular dementia. So over the last year or so, I've become acutely aware of the challenges on individuals, but actually those around them, those who care and those who are close to the carers. It puts pressure all down the chain. So building on that is a key priority, strategic priority. In addition to that is bringing in, if you like, copying the concept of being dementia friendly, but being age friendly. And aging isn't just about physical illness or dementia, as many parts of our town and the affluent demographics are living longer and longer and longer. The issues, again, with someone with aging parents, I'm starting to see all of this, is the sense of isolation, without being too macabre, as people die out, as people die off, as friends get sick and relatives get sick and sadly pass away. That has huge repercussions immediately on a social life and on contacts, but ultimately on mental well-being and a sense of the future. So building on an age, trying to create that age-friendly culture and embed that within communities, to having age-friendly communities is a strategic priority. In addition to that, it's having drugs are our biggest issue. Substance abuse, alcoholism is the biggest single challenge that Middlesbrough as a town faces, in my opinion. In my opinion, that damages our jobs, it damages people's education, it leads to domestic violence, it leads to high crime rates, it deters investment, and it is spoiling our town. I'll stress really clearly that the problems we have in Middlesbrough exist everywhere else, you know, from Tunbridge Wells to Cambridge to Harrogate. All the affluent places have exactly the same problems, but on a lower scale. And that gives us a special and challenging situation here. And dealing with that via an integrated model of support is really key. So I'm really pleased to be talking and learning more and thinking more about how we can build on this integrated model of support for bringing together focus on domestic abuse, homelessness, addiction, essentially bringing together support for vulnerabilities of all kinds, metaphorically in one place. And I think that's a really key strategic priority. And the benefits of doing that, if we get that right, will ripple out across every aspect of Middlesbrough, every aspect. And the last strategic priority I'll bring in is, again, relates to substance abuse and addiction and alcoholism. And it's the focus on the recovery from that, because we have some fantastic action. And sometimes it seems that we have a lot of addicts who are on this path and never get better. But the truth is, so many people break free from the ravages of addiction and not just improve their own lives, but the lives of those around them and even those who live near them. So I think we've got a stated goal of doing a lot more and focusing on recovery. And recovery isn't telling someone to get their act together. Recovery is about enabling someone and removing barriers and hurdles, things like employment, things like somewhere decent, safe and affordable to live. And in addition to that, something softer and more general, but at least as important, is that community integration, making people feel part of a community. So I'm really pleased with those 5 strategic priorities. I'm sure we could all talk on this. It's such a broad field here: public protection, public health and adult social care. But again, as I said before, Eric and Mark are infinitely, and will always be, however long I spend, however much time or many years I spend, they will be infinitely more able to answer intelligent questions than I am. But I will try to answer anything. But if it's anything detailed, Eric and Mark, please feel free to chip in, and I will of course defer things to them. But I'm happy to take questions. I have to say that I do think that this, again, is a very well run directorate. I am sure that it's far from perfect, and I am sure that there are challenges, but I think for a place like Middlesbrough, with the scale of challenges that we have, we stack up well and we perform very well. So I'm very grateful to Eric, Mark and all of the team for what they do. Anyway, enough of me. Let's have some questions, please.
Okay. And I'll open it up to the members. Have we any questions at all? I can't see no hands at the moment.
I have a question, please, Chair. I'm Councillor Halawi.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Could I ask the Mayor if he's in favour of heroin addiction treatment centres? for the town, which is at the cutting edge, isn't it, of making progress and supporting people. And it's quite controversial too.
Shall I go ahead, Chair?
Yeah. Councillor Lau, did you hear Councillor Lau's question, Andy?
Yes, I did. Thanks. Yeah, about the.
Yep.
So I believe that it is a good project. I understand it's controversial. I understand why it's controversial. I get emails from people, or used to, from people talking about issues around where they live relating to this. Sometimes the emails are well-founded, sometimes they weren't. But I totally understand a lot of the issues. And there are various reasons why somebody might be uncomfortable with the idea of supplying any kind of mind-altering substance to someone free of charge. I totally understand that. However, I believe the evidence is there that it does have a role, that it can work, and it can ultimately help reduce crime, improve someone's physical well-being, their mental well-being. And as I said earlier, that then when an addict starts to experience that change and improvement, that ripples out to their partner, their colleagues if they work, which they sometimes do, surprisingly often, their colleagues around them, and importantly their families, especially their kids. And so we need to try and do anything and be brave about it if we believe it works. I believe that HAT does work, and I believe there is a role for it in Middlesbrough and other places. Is it the answer to everything? Categorically not. But are there some candidates who will benefit from it? I believe so.
You're okay with that, Councillor? Councillor Lau, yeah? She must be. Councillor Cope?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, thanks, Chair. Something I did mention to Mark last night at the health panel, but perhaps it's actually be worth mentioning here as well. Once we started to come out of COVID, which I hope we are shortly, one of the things, as we well know, is there's a big backlog in adult care. There's a big backlog in getting people into hospitals, etc., etc. Years ago, we used to have clinics, pop-up clinics, if you like. We used to have vehicles that went round. I remember 1 year ago with the skin clinic. It used to be at outside area, but it was at Asda at South Bank. Is this the time, do you think, to start thinking about that? And getting hospital appointments, getting doctor's appointments is very difficult at the moment, but you have a dedicated place where people, if they think there's a problem, because if you get, for example, skin cancer, if you get any sort of cancer early, you can treat it. If you can treat it, you can cure it. If you don't treat it quickly, that person could well die or be seriously ill. It'd be far better off for the cost, not just the cost, but also for that person's life and the family's life to do this. So I'm, for one, looking for something like that we could start at the One Life Centre and surgeries, etc., to start offering things to people. Well men clinics, well women clinics, things like that. My practice, unfortunately, don't do them, but surely that is something that we could be doing as a council or as a health authority to help people, rather than saying, well, you'll have to see your doctors and it takes ages to do it. And so we should be proactive. I just wonder what Andy and other people think about that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Andy?
Right, thank you, David. Yes, listen, I totally agree. Obviously, I don't. It's my place to say whatever I want, but it's not my place necessarily to say whether the NHS, South Tees should be doing something tomorrow or next week. But I instinctively agree. I mean, for example, a friend of mine has just recovered from surgery for breast cancer, given the all clear, which is brilliant, and her breast cancer was caught really early, like super early, and that monstrously improved her chances of a successful outcome. And what you're talking about there, David, is this build-up, this backlog of this build-up of waiting lists for all manner of things. People have been discouraged to go for various reasons, socially and whatever else. And so there are a number of people out there who we need to get them seen, and they need to get seen. And we're all the same in some ways, aren't we? The stuff that I probably would get the doctor to look at, I want to talk to a doctor for 2 or 3 minutes and run something by them. But have I really got the time to book an appointment and get there and sit there for 20 minutes in the queue? And I normally only do that when it feels like an emergency, to be honest. And I personally believe that if we can have drop-in style centres, and they need to be managed, because some people will drop in every day, of course, and that's not what they're for, but drop-in style centres for particular ailments and particular conditions and get people seen early, that will come at a cost. It'll come at a big cost. It will be a lot of money. But I genuinely believe, and if I cite this friend of mine, if her breast cancer hadn't been caught as early, she could well have been under multi-years of extraordinarily expensive appointments, medications, multiple operations over the years. She's expected now to be completely cancer-free for many, many years, which is brilliant. But that's a supreme example, and it's timely, is that catching things early actually results in a huge, huge, huge saving down the line. And I don't know if really the government any government will ever have a long enough perspective of time and savings to invest enough to create the facilities in the short term to get people seen, prescribe, identify ailments and deal with them, with a view to saving a lot of money over 10, 20, 30 years. But I believe we should be doing that, David. And I totally believe that we have a huge challenge ahead. We're going to see pickups over the next 5 or 10 years in hospitalizations and expensive treatment for cancer, heart problems, and all manner of ailments that we really need to be working on now. And if we don't, then we're going to face huge bills down the line. I'm sorry for your very verbose answer there, but I really believe in this early screening, early talking, early scrutiny, and I think it's really expensive, but I do believe it saves a lot more money down the line.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Andy, I can't see no more hands. I'd just like to ask you the question on your thoughts, really, of obviously it's in the news about the government considering an extra penny on the national insurance to pay for more adult social care. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, away from the politics, about whether, they should go back on what they promised and all that, then that's very debatable, isn't it? I personally believe that if people, the wealthier people of society should contribute more, and so I think we would all agree with that. If you're wealthy, you should pay more tax, and even if you use fewer services, you should pay more tax. The difficulty is that if you are, say, and I'm going to cite family, right? So my dad, working class boy, went to work at Akron Steelworks with his dad and his big brother. Unlike everybody else in his family before him and all his siblings, he worked really super hard, always, not mean, but careful with money, bought a house, and now he needs care. He needs care. And I'm sorry to make this personal, but it's perhaps more real if I do. My dad has some money and he has a house. He's not a wealthy guy. He's never ever earned a lot of money. But he's been careful and frugal when others weren't necessarily. And now he needs care, and he's paying for his care. And within a couple of years, all of his money will be gone. And when I say his money, I don't mean his cash in the bank. That'll be gone super fast. He doesn't got much of that. The value of his house will be gone, and he won't need to sell it now. He can keep it, but he'll need to sell it ultimately. It won't go to his kids. And he's of that generation, of that mindset where he doesn't want to save money to go on a Caribbean holiday. He wants to save money to give it to his kids and his grandkids. That's just how he feels. I could pay for his care, but he doesn't want me to. He wants to pay for it himself. And I think there is something wrong when somebody like my dad, who is of modest means but has been frugal all his life, is forced to pay for care that somebody else who hasn't been as frugal gets free of charge. Solving that conundrum is very tough, because it's somewhere you have to draw the line, because a multimillionaire shouldn't be getting free care, and somewhere you have to draw the line. Now, where that line is, I don't know, and what the government is wrestling with now is where to draw the line. But I do believe that in an ideal world, all care would be free if you want it, and some people could go private if they wanted to. But I think that would be a step too much too soon for us, and I think we need to scale it in. And I think allowing people to have more assets in their house is the right thing. But I do think people of means should be contributing to their domestic care. I'm sorry if I'm giving you a woolly answer, but it's a very difficult one. There has to be a line somewhere, and I think we'll all agree on that. And I think the government's move is a step in the right direction. And I would cite the example of my dad, who's never earned a lot of money, just been frugal all his life. And he's genuinely being penalised now for being careful and working hard. And he's not a wealthy guy. I'll finish there, Mick.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Eric, I can see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair, if I may. So the government yesterday made their announcement around their plans for their NHS and social care levy. There was a 35-page document called Building Back Better released at the same time of that, and we've started to have a look at that. And I had a session with Ian Wright this morning, and a session with our finance business partner on social care yesterday, beginning to talk about that. There's a lot in it that helps us to articulate the questions. There's insufficient detail to really allow us to arrive at answers. So there are the issues about the personal kind of moral rights and wrongs about the way that the system is constructed, the politics of it. But there also is the practical consideration for how that will impact Middlesbrough Council as an organisation, and I think that's the piece that myself and Ian will establish a working group to sit down and articulate. At the moment, as an authority, we have relatively few people who fund all of their own social care, and we have a high percentage of people for whom we make a contribution or we pay all of their care. So our income in adult social care is made up of some money that comes from central government and some money that comes in from the charges that we levy on people for the elements of their care that they do pay for. Because the government is changing the threshold, so at the moment, anyone over 23,000 and a bit will pay for all of their care. In future, anyone over £100,000 will be paying for all of their own care. So that's a significant change for us. And they've also introduced a cap saying no one will pay more than £86,000 for their care, sort of in their lifetime. But we certainly do have individuals within Middlesbrough who will pay more than that over the course of their lifetime. So because we have a component that comes from individuals and a component of our funding that comes from government, and government are changing one end of that, there is a danger that the balance that we have in terms of our income gets disturbed. So one of our first questions is to try and understand what Sajid Javid this morning meant on the radio when he was talking about increasing the amount of money that go direct to councils from local government. We need to understand what the formulas will be that will be applied to that, to understand whether or not we are likely to be in some sort of equilibrium after this is brought in, or whether or not we're better off, or whether there's a negative impact on us as a council financially. That's before we even start to consider the individual rights and wrongs of it all. So it's a complicated piece of work. This came about because decades ago the government said this bit is health and this bit is social care. You pay in your taxes for one bit and you get means tested for the other bit, and that line between those two bodies was essentially arbitrarily drawn, and I think it's a lot greyer than it was decades ago. So it's a complicated piece of work, but once we start to understand those questions, we'll be bringing that back through appropriate channels to make sure that the elected members are fully aware of what's going on. I'll stop, Chair.
Thanks very much, Eric. Councillor Robson, I can see your hand up. Have you got a question for Eric?
Thank you, Chair. Well, it was just comments, really. I mean, I did start to read that yesterday myself, Eric, and I mean, the government are going in the right direction by putting the money up to 100,000. However, like Andy said, there are a lot of people now who have worked so hard all their lives, and this is nothing to do with you, Eric, this is to do with the government. They've worked so hard all their lives, they've been absolutely frugal, scrimped and saved, got themselves a decent house, and on the whole, they were expecting to leave that money to their children. And obviously, if they have to go into care, then that is not going to happen. My thoughts on this are Scotland get it all free, and here we are in England still having to pay. And that just a thought, my thoughts coming over. I think the government need to equal things up a little bit.
If I may, Chair, I mean, all the time I've worked as a social worker, we've had charging arrangements that have meant that some people will have to not sell their house in their own lifetime, but certainly charges get potentially levied against the asset that is your house after your death. It looks to me like that will remain the same after the government changes. The thresholds have changed, so there is an argument that says that certain sectors of society are disproportionately affected by this, and certain sectors of society are protected. I don't think the characterization of the system in Scotland is quite as clear as you describe it. That there are elements of in Scotland the care elements of your social care package are not charged for, but there are hotel elements, if you are. So in a residential care, for instance, if you live in a residential care home, there will be components that are considered to be the care components, and there will be components that are considered to be the accommodation components, the kind of the hotel services. You get means tested against the hotel services, but not the care services. So it's not quite as stark a contrast as you described. It is a different system.
Chair,
thank you.
Can I just come in at this point, Chair, if that's all right?
Yes, Andrew, yeah.
I appreciate that there's a lot to kind of effectively discuss around any levy that would be imposed, but I think we're kind of going a little bit off topic of what the...
Andrew, you've got your microphone up on your head.
Sorry, my apologies. I think we're going a little bit off topic as to what was kind of the remit of the Mayor being here in terms of the any series of decisions and the issues that you wanted to raise to the Mayor. Like I said, I appreciate these are all very nice conversations to be had, and probably further investigation to be had in relation to the levy. But I think if we can revert back to the main issues, if we can, Chair.
Okay, Andrew, yeah, appreciate that. On that, I'll take you, Andy, to your final update. As being Mayor of Middlesbrough, just general questions. I think, or general, information what you have. I have a question regarding the to start off with the article in the Gazette about the council tax arrears. I want your thoughts on that. Obviously, the Middlesbrough having one of the worst council tax arrears collection rates in the country, only second to Blackpool. It was £5.8 million owed in the year 2019-20. Obviously, with the council tax increasing every year, this problem will just persist and highly likely get worse. I just want your thoughts on that, please.
Okay, thank you. So obviously, what we would aim for, right, is 100%. Someone is legally obliged to pay some money. We would hope and expect them to pay it. In truth, obviously, life gets more complex than that, and even the wealthiest boroughs struggle to collect money from some people. We're always going to be challenged, Mick, but that's no excuse for accepting some of the people that don't pay and letting them get away with it. It's interesting that Blackpool is the second worst, because Middlesbrough and Blackpool will always feature in the bottom 5 of economic prosperity, of social engagement, of addiction rates. And I think what we tend to find is that the people who aren't paying are the people who you drag through the courts and still don't pay. They will tend to be people suffering from significant issues. I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for them here. I'm just trying to explain challenges that we have. I personally think that we have a new approach. We instituted a thing called Stop the Knock, where we would stop using bailiffs to collect money. Bailiffs intimidate people. They can sometimes get a payment out of someone, but they're often going to a money lender to keep the bailiff happy, which leads to more financial catastrophe and problems and mental health issues down the line. And what we found, and I don't think Ian Wright's on the call, but Ian Wright told me, I'm confident if I remember this correctly, that Ian Wright told me that since we changed our approach to chasing money for unpaid bills like council tax, and we had a different approach, that the number of people in arrears declined, and which is really interesting. And similarly, I know there's a great organisation called the Ethical Lettings Company, and they work with vulnerable tenants, and they have a lot of staff that focus on these tenants and help them through difficult times, and they understand their tenants' problems, and they have a much higher collection rate with difficult people than a lot of other landlords or agents typically do. And I think it shows that if you work with people and you don't push them into horrible situations, you get a higher collection rate. We need to have a higher collection rate. Non-payment isn't acceptable, but what we need to do at the same time is understand why some non-payment is happening, and come up with intelligent ways to work with that. I'm not getting off topic. It is relevant, is that the Inland Revenue changed their approach to collecting and pushing people for paying their income tax. Not everybody pays their income tax in their pay slip. You know, most people get their pay or their allowance or whatever else, and it's X thousand pounds, and they'll see that every month when they get it, there's money deducted for income tax and NI. There's a huge number of people don't get that, and they have to pay income tax at the end of the year, or tax on capital gains or other things. And basically, what the Inland Revenue realised, they had a very low collection rate, much lower than they thought, and they used to hassle people, they used to threaten people, and they went from this hassling, intimidating approach to a nudge approach, where they would use different wording and encouragement, and they found actually that the different intelligent approach yielded better results, and I think that's what we've moved to. So what I'm trying to say, Mick, is that I think our collection rates, and I don't know how much COVID has impacted that yet. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But our collection rates, when we stopped our bailiff approach, did pick up. So I'd love to see more of that. I don't think anybody should get away with not paying. That's my simple answer. But I do think that if you have someone who is blowing their money on drugs or trying to pay a loan shark, harassing them to death isn't going to help anyone. It's going to plunge them into further turmoil, and we're not going to get our money. So we need to find a way of working people. I would love to see us having as high a collection rate as Stockton, as Darlington, as York, and I don't see why we can't achieve that in the medium term if we can work more intelligently than they can. I don't know whether that's answered your question. I'm disappointed with our collection rate. I know why it's bad. I don't think that terrifying someone who hasn't paid will necessarily increase our repayment rate.
Thanks, Andy. I totally agree with you. It's just, you know, as I say, it increases every year. We just need to have a small increase as possible, really, to help that situation. Thanks, anyway. I can't see no more hands up. I can't see some members, so if you just give us a shout if you've got any questions for Andy, general questions.
Mick, Councillor McCabe, I have a question.
Okay, Dennis, go ahead, mate.
Andy, latest article in the Gazette about the £1 million you're going to spend on the 125 homes to bring them up to standard. I'm a bit concerned that if you divide that up, it's £8,000 per house. What's your views on this? How are you going to do it? Can you explain, please?
Sure. So basically, what we're going to do. So I won't name it because I don't want them to have bad publicity, but there's a woman in the street in a part of town whose life is hell. She goes on holiday with her husband, and they don't walk out the front door with the suitcases because they know if people know they're not there, they're going to get burgled. She goes out the back alley with a suitcase, and he'll go out the back alley 10 minutes later. They've got neighbours from hell, and I don't use that phrase lightly. They have intimidating, threatening, drug-taking neighbours who brawl in the street, are up all night, blast out music. Nobody seems to do anything about it. And from her perspective, people don't care. In her little street, there are 5 properties near her boarded up. She wanted to meet me, so I met her. She didn't want me to go to the house because she knew there'd be repercussions. So I met her at a local school. While I was there, we talked. We're working on how to help her. The school then got onto the issues in that street where she lives and where the school is. And the school explained that despite the fact they've got a good Ofsted rating, they're struggling to recruit parents. Despite the fact there is a shortage of places in some areas, in some schools, with a similar rating, there are parents who won't send their kids there. And it's not because of the teachers, it's not because of the building, it's not because of the way it looks, it's not because of Ofsted. It's because when they drive in or walk in to come and have a look around, they see the boarded up houses. Boarded up houses are an absolute blight, and we need to do something. Now, we need to take action. We cannot sit back, and we've just sat back and watched it. And I was driving around these streets and I thought, what am I doing? I'm actually just tolerating this. I'm letting people get away with this. So we're not going to let them get away with it. We're going to take action. Now, Dennis, I don't know if £1 million is going to renovate 60 houses or it's going to renovate 125. I didn't come up with those numbers. And to be honest, I don't really care. What I care about is taking action, improving the streets, improving behaviour rates, improving mental health, and also the council getting in some council tax. Because often these places are not producing any revenue for us with council tax. But we need to improve people's lives and we need to intervene. And £1 million will, working with partners, bring some houses back to life. It will improve streets, it will improve mental health, it will encourage investment, and it will bring income for the council. So I don't know who wrote 100 to 125 properties. What we do know is that some of these properties might only need £4,000, but some of them might need £25,000. They're tiny, and we're not talking about making them palaces, but we need to make them all habitable and relatively, you know, fuel efficient. And as I say, some of them might be in great shape and need £4,000, but as you know, some might need £25,000. The average could well be 10 or 12. I don't know. And truth is, none of us know. So I don't know why someone put down 100 to 125 properties. But I don't care if it's 75 or 155. What's really important to me is me. I cannot look myself in the mirror and allow people to live next door to homes like that. It's not acceptable. So I take your point that it doesn't seem to be enough money for 125 homes. And I don't know where that number came from, 125. It could be if it's trivial amounts of work needed, but I suspect it's a lot more. So you're right, I suspect we won't get 125 houses done, but I don't care that much, as I say, whether it's 75 or 145. It's taking action and improving communities.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, can I just ask Andy? Are these homes owned by private landlords? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, many. I believe that we will interact with private landlords and we will interact with non-private landlords, i.e. housing associations and other kinds of registered provider.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Hobson?
Yeah, so are we thinking of buying these houses off these landlords, or are we just going to work with the landlords to upgrade them? And if we do that, how do we know that the landlords are going to keep them in a decent manner after we've upgraded them?
Yeah, good question. So there are various ways we can do this. So we could acquire. I as much as that sounds appealing, obviously once people hear that the council's going to go out and buy a load of houses, you know, the prices go up and people sit on empty properties for longer. So I don't think that's the right message or probably the right action. I think what we will be doing is working with the social landlords to encourage them, working with companies like the Ethical Lettings Company, where they've got a cash pile, they've got an investor behind them. They're a charitable organisation, actually, not for profit, but they have an investor behind them where they can acquire properties, but they don't necessarily have the funds to renovate, and they'll be an ethical landlord. But we can absolutely buy properties. If we were to work with a private landlord, the model that I would prefer is that we would, let's say a landlord's got an empty property and it's knackered, that we do something like take a very long lease at a low level. So you've got, let's say, a guy based in Leeds, he's got a house in, say, North Ormsby, it's sat there, he's not collecting any rent, he's probably not paying his council tax. We might propose that we take a 10-year lease on it. We spend the money to renovate it, we rent it out, or Ethical Lettings do, and collect the rent. So what we wouldn't do, which I think is where you're coming from, we're not going to be handing over money to private landlords and saying, improve your property. I think that's just too open to abuse and it's too flawed.
Okay, yep, go on, Chris, yeah. Yeah, of course you can follow up on that, Chris, yeah.
Yeah. Just on that, Andy, then, I mean, are we going to put anything, you know, we need to have a contract of some sort in writing to make sure that these landlords are going to keep the accommodation in good nick, if you like, for the future, because they've let them go down. We do them all up. We need something to say that they can't let them go down again, or they will be fined or what have you. I mean, I don't know what you think about us buying them up, and like you say, obviously the prices will go up, but we've got to negotiate with these people and make sure that the prices don't go up and say that it's not worth anything to them in the state that it's in. But then selling them off at a price that just covers the cost that we've used. You know.
Yeah, I think, Chris, I probably didn't explain something very well. What I was suggesting is that rather than giving any money to private landlords, a model that we would probably use with private landlords, and this is all to be determined. The first thing is making sure the money's available. A model that we would like to use with private landlords would be to say, okay, we will rent your property for the next 10 years, and we'll pay you, say, I don't know, £300 a month, which is below the market rent. But is £300 a month more than they're getting, and it's a guaranteed let for the next 10 years. It's probably an attractive proposition. We would then renovate the property and rent it out for the next 10 years or 9.5 years once it's been renovated. And we would collect all the rent, which would likely be more like £400 a month or £500 a month. And so I just want to make clear what we'll never do is just hand over money to people and say improve your property. I just don't believe in that. What I want to see happening ideally is working with social landlords and not-for-profit organisations that have a social mission and a social goal. But we can work with private landlords, and private landlords are the worst culprits when it comes to leaving places empty and derelict. So yeah, buying is an option. And if someone comes to us and offers at a very low price, we'll absolutely reserve the right to step in and buy that. But what we're not going to do is go out and say we're in the market to buy loads of houses. Similarly, a better option might be a very long-term let where the council or Middlesbrough Development Company takes a long-term lease on a property, controls it for 10 or 20 years, renovates it, rents it out and collects the rent. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, Andy. The only thing that I would say there is I don't think that we should be paying landlords £300 a month for them sitting back doing nothing and taking everything that we've done.
I take your point. Obviously, if we don't give them something, they won't do it. So we have to find a level where it's low enough that we are happy, but it's high enough that they'll do it.
Okay, thanks, Andy. I can't see no more hands or. Oh, yes, I can. Jim, do you want to come in? Jim, Councillor Platt.
Yeah, sorry. Andy, your figures don't really add up. If you're making £100 profit a month, it's £1,200 a year, and then over 10 years, would you say you're going to lease it off them? It's only 10 times that. For what it costs to do the houses up, you'll be losing money.
Well, Jim, it would depend how much you have to spend on the property, wouldn't it? So the more we have to spend on the property, the lower we would offer a landlord in rent. So if somewhere was absolutely just a shell and needed many, many thousands of pounds, we'd offer them a very, very low rate. If a property was in great condition, we'd offer them a higher rate. So the amount of money we would be willing to offer. But please, everyone, don't get fixated on this, because the preferred model is that we are working with other groups who go and buy houses, like the Ethical Lettings Company, who have a war chest of capital behind them to go and do it, or housing associations that own property, but for whatever reason, they're not able to bring it back to life, that we will work with these groups. But working with private landlords will happen if we can get a great deal, categorically. Listen, people on this call don't know me that well. I'm extraordinarily careful with money, and I don't like to give anybody a free ride. So we won't be doing knockout deals with anyone.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Councillor Cope.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Andy, I'm all in favour of this. I think it's a good idea, because the state, there's a lot of the properties in Middlesbrough, without mentioning them, go around the wards. I get complaints from businesses, people I know, saying that properties there are dragging the area down. So absolutely, as long as there's people there think, oh, Middlesbrough Council is a soft touch, we'll just let our properties go to wreck and ruin, they'll put it right, and then we'll just walk away with the profit. So as long as that doesn't happen, so I'm in favour of that. But also, I have mentioned it in the past about the state of places like Wilson Street, where you have properties there. As you come into the town, you look to your right and it's atrocious, so people are getting the wrong impression. So I'd like to see this go further in the future if possible. We look at some of the business properties. I know it's expensive, I know it perhaps wouldn't be the best thing, but we need to work with these landlords, because there are, Wilson Street do have flats, etc., above them, and the place is just appalling. So I'd like to see it go further. And I know there's financial constraints, but I'm sure there's ways of working with the people, maybe even grants, etc., to improve the whole of the housing stock and the business stock in Middlesbrough. I just feel it's important. Thanks.
Councillor Hobson,
Oh, sorry, Mick. Can I just answer David?
Sorry, Andy. Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, of course, sorry.
David, yeah, good point. I think, yes, absolutely. We mustn't be a soft touch. And I think in a strange way, we have been a soft touch in the past, in a different way to the way that most people think. When we've got landlords that own a building site, a landmark building or a house, and then it goes to rack and ruin and brings an area down. And as I say, truthfully, this leads to poor mental health, poor physical health, lack of investment, damages jobs, upsets families. These things are a crime, and we are way too soft, and we don't have strong laws in our favour. But what we can do is hassle these people to death, and many of them will just get sick of it. If they're getting a letter every week, and a letter every 2 or 3 weeks, registered mail, if they're getting regular phone calls, if we are upping the ante and even where we can publicising the fact that they are bringing a street down, I think many of them will change their ways. And I think that in the past, David, what we've done is just kept pretty quiet. And I don't mean officers haven't done a good job. They've done what they thought was the way to do it, which was send the odd letter. But we need to up our game. What I do know is that there are wealthy people who aren't scared of letters from councils, but they're scared of bad publicity. And we need to give them the risk of that, of bad PR, that you're this wealthy person doing whatever, but look at the communities you're damaging. And I think the threat of that will get some of them to up their game. And I totally agree with you about the commercial properties. Wilson Street, what was known as the Astoria, is an absolute disgrace. I do know who the building owner is, and I had a discussion in-house about how we approach him, and he's bought another building recently in the town centre, so I'm fearful that he'll sit on that and let it go to ruin. He's a wealthy guy, lives out of area, he's perfectly pleasant to speak with, but it's not acceptable, and I need to get on the phone with him via appropriate channels. And yes, if we can get buildings at knockdown prices, we should always buy them, because we don't want the wrong people owning them. And that's why we bought the House of Fraser Binns building. It was £1 million. It was an appropriate price for arguably a problem property. It's a landmark, but a problem property. And we didn't want somebody down south or someone further north buying it and just letting it sit empty for 10 years. So we've got to take action. We mustn't go and just buy up loads of stuff and drive prices up and be seen as a soft touch. I totally agree with you and Chris on that. But we do absolutely need to take action on problem buildings, whether it's houses. But we need to hassle and we need to name and shame. You know, Tony Blair's government, rightly or wrongly, had this ASBO thing where they put pictures on buses of people. I dare say we'll get sued if we put pictures of business people on buses and calling them criminals. But I don't see why we can't find another way to name and shame them. If they refuse to engage and they refuse to take action and they're damaging people's lives and damaging this town, we need to make it clear that we won't accept it. Sorry for the lecture.
Not a problem, Andy. Did I see your hand up, Councillor Hobson? Yep.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Andy, years ago, when I first started as a councillor, we used to have an eyesores property officer. That seems to have gone. But it was something that we could use, and if a property was sort of going downhill and you could see it before your eyes, and we have them in our ward as well. I mean, I would just like to see a new officer or somebody designated to eyesore properties. Now, I don't know whether we can do that. I don't know whether the funding would be there, but it was a young lady years ago who was really, really good at what she did. And she would literally send them a letter that they could take you to court if you didn't do something about it. And most of the people did then start and work on the property. Now, that to me would be, before they get to the really bad stage, that would be, for me, intermediate stage to help to stop them getting to the very bad stage. I just wondered what you thought on that.
I totally agree. I think, so Chris, when you were the exec member for finance, I'm sure we passed something about eyesore sites, and it was about 19, 20 months ago. And it was a key passion of mine that we had all these sites across the town that stood empty for between 5 and 15 years, and they were bringing areas down. And we agreed to do something about it. It went through exec, and the officers were going to, and you know what? I chased up on this about 3 months ago. We've all been very distracted with COVID and a million other things. And I thought, well, actually, what's happening with this? And I chased it, and the answer was nothing. Nothing was happening. And it's probably because it wasn't any single person's specific job. People had general jobs that encompassed that, but there was no one's specific job. And so we have lit a fire under that problem now, and we are working on it, and we are furiously contacting people. And if you have an eyesore site, so at some extremes, we've got things like the Park End pub, where I get phone calls, and now they get my number from people on a Sunday morning saying the alarm's gone off again. I was up all night. I don't want them to call me, but I understand why they're calling me, because they don't know what else to do. It's ruining their life. Lazy landlords doing nothing. So we're trying to take action with that site and others. But at a smaller level, Chris, you know, I'll go around it could be in your ward, but it could be anywhere in town, and you'll see a place where the garden is completely overgrown. The person there might be disabled, might have mental health issues. I don't know, whatever the cause is, but it brings the area down. It's not acceptable, and somebody's got to get on the case to the resident or their family or their housing association, saying we won't tolerate this, because it's not just about decaying buildings. It's about the message that it sends when you've got, you know, trees growing in a tiny front garden, and the hedges become a tree, and there's motorbikes in the front garden. We're way too soft on that. The truth is, it's often not our responsibility, but our residents' lives are blighted, and we need to find a way of taking action and getting people going. So I've actually got discussions on that over the next few days about what options are open to us when someone doesn't look after the garden. And I don't mean it's not perfect. What I mean is where it brings down a whole street. We need to know legally what can we do there. I hope that answers your question.
Just Andy, and I thank you for that. And if you get anywhere on that, can you let me know? Because I have 2 properties that I can think of right this minute. That, I mean, there's probably a lot more, but I have 2 where I've been fighting for I don't know, years to try and get them sorted. And we just keep, well, half the time we don't even get a reply from an officer. So
Okay.
I would be happy if you could do something on that and let me know what's.
Well, Chris, do you want to email me about those 2 specific ones?
Yeah, can do. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to check one more question before we move on. Councillor Cole?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. When you got a property in Middlesbrough, Andy, which is a grade 2 or whatever listed building, I'm sure the council has powers in that direction, or certainly there are powers. I've got one in my ward, which is, I get lots of complaints about it, and it's not being done. So I think we do need new enforcement officers and things. I'm sure in the great scheme of things that should be possible to not just have one person doing, but have enforcement within planning within that. And I think that one's pushing forward. So I would agree. Chris is absolutely right. I think we need to do that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Finally, Andy, on your visit, could you just give us a quick update what your plans are in the next year or 2 for Middlesbrough in general, or?
Yeah. Okay. So what's been going on like for the last 2 years? I mean, apart from COVID, it has been this attempt to revitalize the centre of town. Not because I think the centre of town is more important than anywhere else, and not because I'm in love with the centre of town. It's because if the centre of town continues to decay and decline, every single resident in every single area will feel the financial and social consequences of that. So we need to address the centre of town. So I've been focused extraordinarily hard on trying to get the schemes going that will protect jobs in retail, bring in other new jobs, reduce the need to build on greenfield sites. So I think that within 2 years from now, I believe that there will be 1,000 new homes in the central areas of Middlesbrough, including you know, the edges of Grove Hill that border on Albert Park, and I think of that as central Middlesbrough. I know it's not the retail centre, but I think of that as central Middlesbrough. I also believe that within 2 years from now, there will be more offices that are full and vibrant and bringing jobs and allowing businesses to grow and prosper. And I also believe that we will have extraordinary leisure facilities that will mean that people want to come in on a Thursday evening and a Saturday morning and a Sunday afternoon. And I don't mean loads of nightclubs where people are coming out the doors at 3 a.m. and fighting or vomiting or whatever else. I can't promise that'll never happen anywhere, but obviously none of us want to see it. My goal is to have leisure that all kinds of people can enjoy, you know, people with their mates, people with families, people with business colleagues or whatever. And I think that everything is in place to make those things happen. I think that despite COVID, that's now going to emerge. I have largely, not completely, done my work there. And for the last 6 months, 9 months, I've been segueing into a mode focused on communities. And some people will know, some won't, that I have spent a huge amount more time, in particular in the poor areas, but not exclusively, in the poor areas, sitting down with people. I sat in someone's kitchen last night. Someone was plagued by, as I say, in the softest sense of the word, antisocial behaviour, but intimidating behaviour that is bringing him and his family to the point of severe mental distress. And I'm not going to spend all my time sat in people's kitchens at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night, but I am going to be walking around and working on how we get these problem properly sorted, getting people that refuse to conform, and we cannot get to conform, getting them kicked out, getting the cameras installed so we can monitor the troublemakers and deter further bad behaviour, and building new homes in places like estates where stuff's been knocked down and just nothing's there in its place, and it sends a message that nobody cares. So my mission for the next 2 years is to let people in communities know that Middlesbrough Council is a real, caring, compassionate thing. Despite how it seems, we are here for them. We want to reduce the number of characters terrorising estates on their motorbikes. We want to reduce drug dealing. All of these things, they're not all completely within our control, but we can play a role in fighting them. We can play a role in fighting crime. I don't think that, despite the brave efforts of police staff, I don't think Cleveland Police is doing a great job in Middlesbrough right now. And I stress again, despite the fantastic efforts of staff, I don't think we are getting enough from them, and I need to be pushing on that. But my job for the next 2 years, making answer to your question, is to be inside every community and showing them exactly what Middlesbrough Council does for them already that they didn't know, but what more can we do within the constraints of our challenged financial position. There is a lot more we can do, and when people feel appreciated and supported, they're always capable of a lot more. And that's my goal, is to make people feel appreciated and supported. And I've been doing that, and many people won't realise it and have seen it, but I've been relentlessly out and about, visiting people, visiting communities, knocking on doors in some cases, and making sure that people know that I'm listening to them and trying to work out what we can do to make their lives slightly better. And I'm not, and you're not, and we are not going to transform anyone's life bar the odd fluke. But what we can do is make everybody's life slightly better and give them a bit more optimism for the future. Because some people have lost that sense of optimism, and they feel that their current predicament is how it's going to be. And it doesn't have to be like that. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely, Andy, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, all I can say, I can't see no hands up. I think you've answered quite sufficiently in loads of questions this morning. And I'd just like to thank you for attending today's meeting. And has anybody got any more detailed requests, I'm sure they can email you and you'll answer them. Okay. Thanks very much, Andy. You're quite willing to stay, but I realise you're a busy chap. So, as I say.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much.
You.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Okay, we'll come down to the next item on the agenda, which is, pardon me, the Children and Young People's Learning Scrutiny Panel final report. on behaviour, discipline and bullying in the schools. Is the board happy for this to be sent to executive for approval? Yeah, I can't see any disagreements. Oh, Councillor Cook, was that your thumb up? Yeah.
Yes, thumb up. I would agree that it should be passed to executive. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Agenda item number 7 is the Executive Forward Work Programme. Caroline, can I bring you in on this one? Hello, Caroline. You're on mute.
Unmute your microphone.
Are you there, Caroline?
I think she might be having a few technical difficulties, Chair.
Okay.
Would you
Well,
like me to take it through?
if you
Chair?
if you can,
Yeah,
if
no,
you can,
that's no problem. That's no problem. I'll just put my video on, Chair.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Yeah, it's just an update.
Thanks, Sue.
It's the Executive Forward Work Programme, which reports and decisions that will be taken by the executive in the near future on a 4-month basis. Obviously, if there's any questions that you have in relation to those, I can obviously take them back to the relevant officers. Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay. Check that on board. Thank you. Item number 8, I believe it's the Chief Exec. I think Tony's here. Yeah. Are you there, Tony? Can you hear me?
I can, Chair. Can you hear and see me?
I can't see. Where are you? Yes, we can see you now, Tony. Yeah.
But I had a bit of difficulty joining. I've got Gemma with me. She's going to share the presentation and drive. Just
Brilliant.
brief the presentation.
That's fine. Well, I'll hand it over to you, Tony. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mick. Yeah, fairly brief presentation. You know, we're in holiday season, so probably one of the quieter months. But once Gemma gets the presentation up, I'll go through it, just following the usual format. Okay, so if we move onto the next slide, Gemma. So I'm going to cover COVID. I'll give you a quick update on COVID, just some of the business that's gone through in September, and then I was going to talk to you about reoccupation of the civic buildings. So as far as COVID goes, you'll see there our numbers have started to go back up a little bit. We got down to about 320. We're up to 395.8. Probably not completely a complete surprise given that the schools have gone back, but obviously something that we keep a keen eye on, both because we're heading into the winter season, the flu season, so there's the chance of more people becoming infected, and because we've still got a significant number of unvaccinated people, so that's something we're just keeping an eye on. But you can see from there that our numbers are just starting to go up a little bit over the last few weeks. Haven't come down. I think yesterday was 92, and I think today is 95 cases. So just heading in the direction we'd rather it didn't at the moment. We move on to the next slide. In terms of the vaccination summary, we're about where we were previously. So on the first chart there on the far left, I think we were 102nd last time, and we're 106th, and the other slide we were 101st, and we're still 101st, and on the others we're still pretty much where we were. So not really where we want to be on vaccinations, if I'm being entirely honest, and we're doing everything that we can to try and persuade people and to help people be vaccinated, and we are having some success. And you'll see in later slides we have got a greater proportion of the older population vaccinated now, but we just need to keep pushing, because I'm very aware that, as I said, we're heading into the winter season, but also that we'll be heading into the process of boosters pretty soon. I think the national studies that have been taking place suggest that after about 5 or 6 months, the effect of the vaccination starts to wane. So it's really important that we get back into the sort of vaccination of people and the booster programme, which, as I understand it, we will be leading on from a public health perspective. So if we can get as many people vaccinated now, that will just mean we can then concentrate on that task. Move on to the next slide, Gemma. These are the vaccination rates by age band, and you'll see very low percentages now in the 65 pluses, but given the health profile of the town, still a bit of a concern, those who are age 50 plus and maybe even 45 to 49 plus. But the younger you are, the less likely you are to be vaccinated, as you can see. So it's not a bad picture, but we'd rather have less blue and more of that other colour that I don't know how to describe, orange, I would describe it as. And if we look on the next slide, there was a question that was asked about testing and positivity last time in terms of, well, are we just getting, you know, are we looking so high because loads of people are getting tested, or is our number coming down because less people are getting tested? This shows the results both in the most recent 7 days that we've got, so that takes us up to the 31st of August, and you'll see there that in that week we had 3,575 tests. So that gives us a figure of 2,500 per population, per 100,000 population, which is slightly below, about 8% below the All England average. It's above the Tees Valley average. And you'll see our positivity rates are at 12.4% against the national average of 9%. But our positivity rates are consistent with those across the Tees Valley and just reflect the fact that the Tees Valley is high for COVID rates at this point in time. And if we look at it since June, again, you'll see there we're actually ahead of the England average for both for all tests, and we're ahead of the Tees Valley average. But we're pretty much in line with the Tees Valley in terms of positivities and above the All England average. So I think the story there is, you know, our figures are real. You know, the figures are not high because more people are getting tested. The figures are not coming down because less people are getting tested. Our figures are just reflective of the prevalence of the virus in this area. And that's based, all of that is based on PCR tests, not on LFT tests. Move on, Gemma. Just to cover executive business. So community engagement, that approach was approved by executive, and we're now going to formally consult with the public about how they can become more involved in council business and how we can engage them in both shaping and delivering our agenda, and also how we're better at formal consultation, which is something I'm quite keen on. We've also had a new corporate debt management policy approved, which will provide clearer guidance on the recording, reporting, recovering and monitoring the council's debt. It's something we've just tightened up. I've had a proposal to dispose of the Nunthorpe Grange farmhouse yard and barns that was approved, and that generated a capital receipt. It'll bring the property back into use, and it obviously helps us with our capital programme because it brings money in. We've set out a surveillance policy that's been approved, so that just means that we can undertake covert directed surveillance where there's a legitimate reason, and that'll help us with, you know, our targeted work on back alleys and environmental crime in those areas. We also took a report on Children's Improvement Plan, and we've really made good progress with Children's Services from the low point that we were at in January of last year. We did have an Ofsted monitoring visit, which involved 5 inspectors being here for a period of 3 days. So it was like a mini inspection. And they were really impressed with where we've got to, and described us as being ahead of the curve compared to other authorities who are going through an improvement journey. So that's good. And what we're starting to see is the impact of that work now. So because we've got better quality social work and we're managing the demand a little bit better, we've seen our number of children looked after reduce from the high of over 700 to week before last it was 536. So that's a significant reduction in our children looked after population. Within the population of children that we're looking after, we're seeing less children placed in external residential placements and more children being placed in house. We're seeing less children being placed with external foster carers through independent fostering agencies, and more with our in-house foster carers. And the more we do in-house, then the cheaper it is. It's more expensive to place children in the independent sector. So everything in children's services appears to be going the right way, and massive thanks to Sue and her team for that. The only indicator that's not quite going the right way is the proportion of our staff that are employed through agency, which we're looking to reduce. But there has been some, although the total hasn't changed, we have got less agency social workers who tend to cost us a lot more than employed social workers. So that's good, and that's part of our workforce strategy for getting to a kind of steady state on the use of agency workers at a point in the future. And then finally, we took our revenue and capital budget and the projected outturn, and there's no significant concerns at this point. We're not envisaging that we will overspend at this point in time. And then if we move on finally to reoccupation, which is something we've been talking about for a while, and we've been looking at that with one eye on the COVID rates in the town and such like, and another eye on guidance and legislation that's coming out from government. We're in a place where we can move forward now. So during September, we'll finalise these arrangements for a phased reoccupation, and that'll include us updating all premises and service risk assessments. That work's well underway. Confirming exactly which staff will fall into each phase, because we're going to reoccupy in 3 phases. Notifying them, getting them the guidance, making sure they do the online course that they need to do before they come back and such like, and put in place this sort of structured plan so that we can be sure that people are safe and the work environment's safe. Reoccupation will then begin in earnest on the 4th of October, as long as we don't get a kind of major increase in transmission in the town. Within the context of blended working, so blended working being where people have a mix of home and office working, and our planning assumption is that people will spend on average 3 days per week working from home and 2 days a week in the office. And that will result in October, first group of staff who will come back and start to work in the office. The staff who haven't signed up for the blended working office, so they don't want that blended working office offer, they want to work in the office. Or they want blended working, but they're experiencing difficulties because of the home circumstance, so it's difficult to work at home for whatever reason, or their health and well-being. They've indicated that they've got health and well-being issues associated with, for example, a lack of contact with other people, so want to get back to the office as soon as possible. We'll get all that settled in, and then first week in November, we'll bring back the staff who are ineligible for blended working, and there won't be many of those, and those whose productivity is affected by home working. So there's some staff who will say, well, actually, I work much better at work because, for example, I need 2 screens to do my job, or I need a really large screen, or I need a specialist piece of equipment. So I'm more productive at work. So we'll bring those back. And then once we've got those settled, the biggest group of staff will be the 3rd group. And that'll be everybody else, and we'll bring them back from the first week of December. And at the next meeting, I'll update you on how that's gone, and we'll have the numbers and such like. And that's it for this time. So quite brief this time, but obviously, Chair, happy to answer any questions that you've got.
Thanks, Tony. I can't see anybody until we. Gemma, can you check the slides off and then I'll see the faces if you don't mind? There we go. There's a few hands up now, so I'll check Councillor Thompson because I realise you're going shortly, Janet.
Yeah,
Councillor?
thank you, Chair. Yeah, I do have to leave, unfortunately. Thank you for that presentation, Tony. I thought it was excellent. I did read it beforehand. Can I just ask you, is our COVID testing sites still going, or have they finished now?
No, the COVID sites are still there, Janet. They're still there, and as you can see from the slides that we produced there, there's still quite a few people going through them. So in the 7 days between the 24th and the 31st of August, we had over 2,500 people who used those sites.
So do we know how long they're going to be staying there then?
I don't, but I can find that out and let you know and bring it back to the next meeting.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Janet. Councillor Hobson?
Thank you, Chair. My question is something that I think I asked you last time, Tony, about the universities and the colleges. Have we got anything outside there that the students can actually just walk into at break time or something and get vaccinated? So I think that is a very important bit. I really feel that we've got an awful lot of students around the town the last couple of days, which is lovely, which is certainly helping the economy because they're all stuffing their faces with various sandwiches and sausage rolls. But I really do think if we could have something around the university and colleges and even the art college where they could just walk into to get vaccinated, I think that might help.
So the university had specific arrangements that they put in place because obviously those people who go to that university are going to be resident in the town. So they've been utilising some of their space for kind of dedicated resources for COVID right through the pandemic, whether that be testing or vaccination. And we've made use of the Melissa bus and such like on certain days. With the college, it's slightly different because, of course, they're drawing students from right across the Tees Valley and beyond. So a lot of the people who go there are not Middlesbrough residents. But again, on their recruitment days and their induction days and such like that, we've had the Melissa bus there, and that's something that we'll continue to do.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Coop.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, Tony, you mentioned about it, the COVID rates going up again, which I think it's 402.9, I think was a figure yesterday or late yesterday. We've talked in the past about other areas going up, the Middlesbrough following. Do you see that happening again this year? Because I know last year about this time things were fairly low, and then October they just went through the roof. So how would you see this going? Is there things we should be looking at across other parts that we can see the signs in Middlesbrough, and how we just that's going to affect it, because that will affect occupation, it will affect right across the town? Thanks.
I honestly don't know, David. I think we certainly, what is really clear is that we shouldn't in any way relax around COVID. I know it's reported much less now, but the virus is still here, and the virus still has the potential to cause significant damage to those who are vulnerable. Our rates are high, and if we get the crystal ball out, I can tell you the things I'd be looking at, but I can't tell you kind of how they'll play out. We've got a significant proportion of our adult population who are not vaccinated. We've got a significant proportion of our population who have been vaccinated, whose immunity might wane over the next few months as we get into as we start to need to get into issuing boosters. I don't know what the availability of staff and vaccine will be like over the next few months. We've got schools that have just gone back. We don't know what that's going to, what difference that's going to make. You would think it would be negative in terms of it will increase the number, but by how much I don't know. Don't know what proportion of school children have had the disease and are immune. So there's just kind of all sorts in the mix. Then on top of that, it's the winter. And it's the flu season, and we know that COVID is more likely to be more prevalent through that time than it is through the summer. So there's kind of a load of issues there that would all indicate that, unless we've got immunity across the community, that the figure is likely to go, in my book. But that's purely a personal opinion, and that is why, we can't relax on COVID. We've got to stay fixated on it, because otherwise, potentially we end up with the scenario that we had last year, where we've got the virus creeping into the older or more vulnerable population, the hospital system being put under pressure. I've noticed today, I've just seen an article about a potential October lockdown in the school holidays, for example, that the government are considering. So I think there's all sorts of issues there that we know what the issues are, but we don't know what the answer to the question that we would pose is. But they're all likely to increase the rate rather than decrease it.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Is there any more questions? I can't see certain members. I don't know. So if you just shout up if you've got a, Councillor Lowy. You okay? Oh, she's silent, so well, saying
Nothing
that,
from me,
Tony.
Chair.
Are you okay, Dennis? Yeah,
I am
fine.
fine,
Stefan?
nothing from me.
Okay.
I'm good,
Right,
thank you,
thanks
Chair.
very much. Okay then, Tony, I think that's about it really on your update. I'd like to thank you very much for
Thanks, Chair.
attending.
Thank you.
Thank you. We go to agenda item number 9. Any other urgent items which I might think anything? I haven't got anything at all. So I think lastly is the date of the next meeting, Caroline. Have we got that? Hello. She's smiling. I can't hear you. We'll have Susie, have you got the date of the next meeting? I think Caroline's going down again.
You just bear with me, Chair. I shall find it for you. One moment.
Sorry, Chair, my mic's not working properly.
Oh,
It's the 19th of October, Chair.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, that's a 19th.
Thank you.
Okay, after saying that, I'd like to close this meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, the members and the officers. Thanks very much for attending, and we'll see you all on the 19th, if not before. Bye-bye for now.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chair.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.